Vision Australia.
Blindness,
low vision,
Opportunity.
With Vision Australia's new approach to promoting meaningful participation and employability for the future, this is inclusive of children with multiple disabilities.
Often when we're working with families as service providers, we're trying to help them develop goals and think about skills that their child needs to work on in order to more meaningfully participate in life. But sometimes parents just aren't there yet, or they're going through a lot because they have a child with multiple disabilities and they didn't really plan for this. And their life is just really overwhelming. So, how do we engage them in this process when sometimes they don't have the capacity?
We need them to be engaged sometimes in tasks that they had never anticipated that they would need to be engaged in. We have to remember that as service providers. We are dealing with this all day, every day. We've met with other kids like this. We've worked with other families who have similarly disabled children. But for these parents, this is their first and only experience with children with multiple complex needs. We have to keep that at the front of our brain all the time. We have to remember that for these parents, it's the first and most traumatic experience of their lives in the world of disability. And I think we have to be empathetic. We have to remember that it's hard, that these are parents who suddenly have had every facet of their lives disrupted. A, they were expecting a typical child. B, they were expecting that it would be tough, but that it would be manageable, and then it would smooth out. But it's not in many instances. It's an ongoing barrage of issues and problems and needs. Some of these children have such complex medical needs that they are going to hospital repeatedly, and the parents are taking them, and they're traumatized again and again and again. Where we, as service providers, can step back, can take a deep breath, can go to our own homes, our own families, breathe a sigh of relief, and carry on, they cannot. They are having to deal with the child and the difficulties, the issues all day, every day. It never escapes them. And I think we, first as service providers, have to be empathetic. We have to be sensitive to the fact that they're being challenged in multiple ways that they never anticipated being challenged. And so where we're asking them to do more and more and more, they're thinking, enough already, I have enough to do, I can't do anything else. So we need to be a little bit less demanding, I think, and more calm, cool, and collected, if you will, in our approach. Prioritize what you want parents to work on. Pick just one behavior or one skill or one thing that you would really like to get a parent's engagement in, or get a parent's participation in terms of a task that you're working on or a behavior that you're trying to alter. Pick one thing. As service providers, we tend to set multiple goals. And while that works well for us and for the children sometimes, it's pretty overwhelming to parents at times. They certainly have lots and lots of other things they have to consider with this child that we're working with therapeutically or in supporting. Those parents have to feed the child, clothe the child, bathe the child, get the child ready to go to school, bring the child home from school. They have 101 things they're doing, and we're asking them to do the 102nd thing. Don't ask them to do also 103, 104, 105, 106. Just stick with 102. Take a deep breath. Look at what your goals and your objectives are that you think are important for the child, and then stop. Speak to the parent. Find out what's important to the, maybe the parent wishes that you would work on feeding skills above all other things, because that's the thing that's causing the most duress at home. Maybe you're thinking, oh, that's really not the most important thing. Talk to parents and find out what are your priorities? What's going to make the difference in your life? What do you think is going to make the most difference in your child's life? And prioritize that. Even if you think, oh, this isn't the right one, don't say that. Say instead, I think you have a point there. Let's work on that. How long do we need to work on that, do you think? Sometimes, as service providers, we go down a rabbit hole. We're thinking, oh, the most important thing in the world is to work on fill in the blank. We have to let go of the fact that we might be the expert and follow what the parent wants and needs sometimes and trade it off. So I think it's about negotiating sometimes with parents, negotiating with the caregivers in that child's life, because you can't do everything at once.
Well, and I think parents understand more sometimes on how things are going to work into their usual routines and the things that they have to do already. So we may have these expectations, but they actually know what they have the capacity to do right now, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we have to give a lot of grace, because we could come back many times and that family may not have worked on the goal that they had agreed to work on. It just, often parents have that, put high expectations on themselves and then feel very guilty when they can't meet that.
Right. Or I think the other thing that happens sometimes, Trish, is that parents agree to work on a goal and then they start working on it and think, oh, this isn't going to work, or this isn't right for our family. They don't always feel comfortable saying to us, I can't cope with that, I don't want to deal with that right now. But we need to be paying attention, and if we see that something isn't happening that we were expecting to happen, what you said, we need to give them some grace, we need to step back and let that be, but we also need to follow up and say, I've noticed that this thing that we were going to work on isn't really happening in the way that I thought, and I'm wondering if perhaps I chose the wrong goal, or if it's not working for you because it doesn't fit into your family routine, or is this something that's really not that important to you? We need to be graceful in exiting out as well as waiting patiently for something to happen. So I think we have to have conversations with
Well,
families.
and we're talking about giving them realistic feedback. I think we need to open the door so we get realistic feedback too, right? And if we don't have that conversation, particularly with this group, I think we're in trouble. We had talked about communication and how sometimes that's really subtle, but sometimes parents are feeling like they're not getting a whole lot of feedback on if things are going well. We talked about smiles and some of those subtle things, but I know that when I've worked with some families, it's been working together so we can identify some of those things where the child actually is visually noticing something, or might be feeling pleasure in things that they haven't cued into yet, but we can sort of direct them that way. So it's kind of interesting in this population, because I think it's a bit more of, it's a back and forth thing.
And I think it's a collaboration with kids with multiple disabilities or complex needs. I'm always thinking, I can't do it all. I can't do it all. And I know the parents are feeling the same thing. They can't do it all. None of us can do it all. We have to work as teams. I need to work with the OT, with the O&M, with the vision specialist. I need to work with the person who is responsible for spectacles, if that's an orthoptist or an ophthalmologist or an optician. I have to work with these other, the OT, the PT, the speechy. I have to work with all these people just because The needs are so complex. I have a responsibility to communicate to all those other people that are on the team, including the parents. It's hard to get generalizability. It's very difficult to achieve preset notions of benchmarking. They're not typically going to meet the developmental guideposts that we set for other children who don't have those same kinds of complex needs, or they're going to achieve in ways that are different than the kids who are typically developing. And we need to work as a team to sort out what's working, what's not working, and how we need to approach things differently. I need to be sure that we're documenting all of that so that the next service providers in that next environment have the same understanding of what works and what doesn't work with this particular child who's now this particular adult.
We have a unique opportunity as service providers to celebrate small gains and small achievements. And sometimes when I've been working with those children, it's not until I point out something that a child is able to do by themselves or what they're learning in a particular environment, and that I'm celebrating that they then get excited as well about their child. And so often they have so many medical issues, they're medically fragile children, like you said, lots of hospitalizations, lots of negative things. It's so wonderful as a service provider to be able to celebrate something and share that with the family.
And we need to celebrate that. We need to acknowledge that. We need to make our own benchmarks and document that for the future. Because what we all know is that these young people are going to grow up, and the only way they're going to live happily ever after, frankly, is if we can capitalize on the gains we've made and continue to add to their toolbox of skills and attributes that are going to help them make it in the real world.
Yeah, and you think about how many service providers and people are part of a child's life when they have multiple disabilities, whether it's medical professionals or carers, and each year when they transition from one classroom to the next, and later in life, it's just a lot of people in your life that really need that information to be the support that they need, or the consistency, so they can use the abilities they have.
And it's also lifelong learning.
It is.
It is for everyone, but particularly for these children. It takes a lot of repetition, and just because they finish school doesn't mean that they finished learning. They can still continue to learn.
And what I want to share with service providers working with children and young people is that there will be another service provider out there in the future. And that service provider needs to know where to start. And you guys are in the perfect place to tell someone like me, working with that young person as an adult, where to start and where to capitalize on strengths rather than come back and keep assessing and reevaluating and trying to figure out, can he do it, can he do it, can he do it? It's so much easier. It's so much more fluid. It's so much less pain and anguish for the client and the family and the other service providers if we all communicate with one another. So I would just like to wrap up by sharing with all of you that the concepts that we've talked about on the previous videos, conveying high expectations, encouraging socialization, building, developing, refining alternative techniques, disability-specific skills, the notion of sharing real, honest feedback with kids, and this last construct of providing opportunities for work or promoting opportunities for work. Those constructs are universal. And whether the children have multiple disabilities or not, we need to be thinking about those 5 concepts all the way through their lives. How we convey our high expectations, how we encourage socialization, what we are doing to develop disability-specific skills, how we are providing that realistic feedback, and how we are promoting opportunities for work right through the course of their lives, regardless of ability level.
Vision Australia.
Blindness,
low vision,
Opportunity.